Okay, hi Maria. My name is Erin Hutchins, and I am in your Sociology 112 class, Family and Diversity. This is my question video in our supplemental activity points list, and I'm going to be asking you some questions based off of some of the subjects that we spoke about in class. I've split up my questions into four different sections. They're on four different subjects. The subjects that I chose are things that I feel like I can relate to personally and therefore have a more in-depth thought process about. So that way my questions can be more endearing, can be more thought-provoking, and therefore more valuable to you and to me as a person. So here we go. My first questions are on the subject of divorce and marriage. Now, I know we talked a lot about divorce in class, what plays into why people get married, why people get divorced. I know that race plays into it, whether or not a couple has lived together prior to getting married, whether or not they have kids, what their economic situation is. All of those things play a part. And mostly, my main question for this is why do people get married? And I know that sounds so cynical, and I don't mean it that way. I'm a romantic at heart, just like any other girl. I like my chick flicks, and I imagine, the perfect loving relationship. But I never really understood why divorce rates are so high, yet marriage rates continue to be just as high, if not higher. You would think that there's a ton of people getting married, so there's a ton of people getting divorced. So at some point, we're going to realize that maybe we shouldn't be getting married so quickly. People are still getting married left and right, young, old, what have you. But is every single marriage that happens truly because you feel like you found the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with? Obviously not, because there's so many divorces. And I feel like we don't really marry for love, but we marry because it's just what you do. We are taught from a very young age. There's a nursery rhyme that I learned when I was 4 years old, and I'm sure you know it too. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby in a baby carriage. It's ingrained in us from the time that we're like 4 or 5 years old when we first learn about what marriage is, that you're supposed to grow up and find somebody, fall in love with them, get married, and then pop out 2.5 babies and live your life happily ever after. But I feel like that need to get married, kind of like that idea that it's just what you're supposed to do, kind of not necessarily forces people, but just kind of makes them think that they don't necessarily need to be 110% in love. They found somebody who's acceptable. So we've been in a relationship for a little while, let's get married. That's what's next, right? It doesn't necessarily mean, that I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but that's just what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to get married, so let's just get married. And I feel like that's why so many divorces happen. And I was just kind of wondering what your thoughts were on that. Just basically your thoughts on, do we get married for love, or do we get married because it's just what you do? My next set of questions are on college hookups and orgasms. I really enjoyed this section in class, and I think it's a really important thing to talk about because it's kind of a taboo subject that not a lot of people like to discuss, the amount of hookups that happen in college. And I could ask questions for 20 hours on this subject, but I nailed them down to two general questions that have really been prying at me, not just because of class, but just because of my experiences with hookups in college myself. My first question is, why do men feel such a disconnect from sex and a disconnect from losing their virginity? This is something that I've always wondered. From a very young age, girls are taught that their virginity is this gift that they give to somebody. It's this important part of them that they can never get back, so they have to pick the right guy that they really just want to have this. They want to give this huge, monumental piece of themselves to. It's considered, that there's romantic implications, spiritual implications, physical implications dad or their mom was like, okay, son, here's how this works. You have this amazing gift of your virginity, and one day you're going to have to pick one real special gal to give it to. Make sure it's special. Make sure it means something. You know, just going off of an experience I had with a really good friend of mine who was a guy, I was telling him, I was asking him about how he lost his virginity, and basically the story was like, well, yeah, there was this girl in my, homeroom in junior year of high school, and she was pretty, and I thought she was kind of cool, and so one day we just, had sex in the back of my car, and that's how I lost my virginity. The end. And I was just like, dude, wow, that was blunt and quick, and and I asked him why it was something that he just kind of shrugged off his shoulders, and he's like, I don't know, it's just not that big a deal. And so I've kind of taken a practice, it's a weird one, but I've taken it, of asking guys their virginity stories of how they lost their virginity, and they almost always come out like that, kind of just like a shrug off the shoulders sort of thing. And I feel like that plays a huge role into why guys don't connect love and sex. We talked about how there are certain situations that are more conducive for a girl having sex, and part of that is them having this emotional connection to the person that they're with. And guys don't necessarily need that, and that's definitely something that I've found true from my own experiences with hookups. I don't always necessarily orgasm because, most of the time it's just because, I'm not in love with that person. And that sounds super hokey, but it just doesn't necessarily always happen. But with my track record, guys have always orgasmed. and that sounds like I'm playing myself up, and I'm really not trying to. I'm just saying that, there doesn't necessarily have to be that connection. There doesn't necessarily have to be that I feel for you kind of thing for a guy, but there does have to be that for a girl. And I feel like it's because such stress is put on sex for us from such a young age, but for guys, it's just, something that happens. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. My third section is on gay and lesbian relationships / families. And my first question is kind of broad, but I think it's important to ask. Where does homophobia truly come from? I've always wondered that. Homophobia as a word means fear, phobia, of homo, same, people of a homosexual orientation. People are afraid of people who are homosexual. And when I think of fear, I think of it as, you had an experience with something that went terribly. Like you got scared out of your mind by a huge fire, and now you're arachnophobic, or you had this really bad experience on an airplane, so you're terrified of flying an airplane. But most of the time, and from my experience, and I'm sure this proves true, people who are truly homophobic and truly have bigotry running through their veins have never sat down with someone of a homosexual orientation, had a conversation with them, and had it go so badly that they are now afraid of people who are homosexual. It's something that's ingrained in us from birth sometimes, and I really just wonder, why the fear? Why are you so afraid? That's a broad question, and probably something that really no one can answer, but that's a question that I have. And stemming off of that, why are gay parents considered unworthy of having children? Why is it that they automatically are considered not able to properly raise a child? That's where a lot of argument comes from. Like, a child needs a mother and a father. That's what's going to make a good parent. If it's a mother and a father, a man and a woman, that's where good parenting comes from. And I truly think that if you ask any parent, the real trick to good parenting is loving your kid, supporting your kid, putting food in their mouths and a roof over their head and clothes on their back. That's what comes from being a good parent. And I don't think that that's something that hinges on whether or not it's a man loving a man or a woman loving a woman. I think it's something that you just have the ability to do as a human being. And I don't understand why heterosexual parents are immediately assumed able to raise a child, but homosexual parents have to fight for their right to even be considered to have a kid. just a question that's always been on my mind. And my last set of questions comes from our conversations about girls who police each other in middle school, and then I'm also going to talk about it kind of in college. Um, the first question is we discussed how the main thing that girls police each other on are their looks, and I really just want to know why that is. I know that media plays into it and how we're raised plays into it, but it seems like girls, even at a super young age, are only concerned with the way that they look. Why is it that a girl needs to be skinny to be considered beautiful? Why does she have to have long, beautiful hair? Why does her makeup always have to be perfect? Why does she always have to look fashionable? Why is it that there are so many other things, like how smart you are, how talented you are, how able you are to take care of yourself, and all those things are considered incredibly valuable, but looks are always just above that. Like, you may not be smart, but gee, you're pretty, so it's okay. That kind of attitude. And I know a ton of girls who have that, and it drives me insane. And then my last and final question, I know I'm going over here, but do girls perpetuate the perfect woman fantasy? I almost feel like because we as women put so much value into the idea of looking good, we kind of like kick ourselves in the butt with that one, put our foot in our own mouth on that one, because we make it so when guys look at us and guys hear us talk, they hear us talk about how important looks are. So they think looks are important. Like I've had guys tell me that they don't care if a girl has 5-inch heels on or if her hair looks perfect or if she has makeup on. Like she could show up in sweats and it really doesn't matter. She's still a girl. I could still find her beautiful if she's wearing tennis shoes and no makeup and a pair of sweatpants. That's possible. And I feel like a lot of times girls kind of do it to themselves, perpetuate that sexual double standard and that perfect woman fantasy. I feel like it's something we sometimes do to ourselves, and I was just kind of wondering what your thoughts were on that. Okay, I know I'm over time. I know I was supposed to say at 10 minutes, and I'm almost at 13, and I apologize for that. But I hope you liked my video. I hope it's what you were looking for. I'm really interested to see if you have any answers to my questions, and I look forward to coming to class on Tuesday. And happy Thanksgiving.